Right, so what were the markets looking like? Well, I got to tell you, the local markets closing 0.5% in the red this afternoon, brought down largely by banks. You also had the oil price taking a hit this afternoon. Let's bring in Nesan Nair from Sasfin for some market analysis. Nesan, thanks indeed for talking to us. Let's start with ShopRite. You know, it's really, as I said, a bellwether for the grocery retail industry, isn't it? It's the largest retailer in or on the continent. Trading profit up for the first 6 months. Fairly good set of results, I would say.
Absolutely, Devin. And let's not forget that 22% increase in the dividend, close to 2 Rand a share dividend. So, you know, a very impressive set of numbers. And I think a lot of very happy ShopRite shareholders out there. But, you know, if you look at it in context, we've had a phenomenal set of numbers coming through from the retailers. You know, cast your mind back to Woolworths and Truworths' update. You know, they had fantastic days. Massmart was last week. The share price reacted over 20% on the day, you know, as a result of their numbers. So I think a lot of people were concerned in 2020. You know, ShopRite's results, obviously the last part of 2020. But a lot of people were concerned in 2020 exactly how these retailers are going to do in the face of much higher unemployment. But it seems like those lower interest rates really kicked in. With people having presumably a lot more disposable income. You know, ShopRite results, remember, if you exclude the impact of the liquor ban, was close to 8% up in South Africa. So a really great result from them in what was very difficult trading conditions.
It's interesting you speak about retailers, and I'm wondering whether or not this was just not that knee-jerk of, you know, the gates opening towards the end of the year last year, where we saw those restrictions lifted and people having a bit more cash on their hands. Is this sustainable? The shareholders for ShopRite certainly think so, because their share price is 4% up on an otherwise very gloomy day elsewhere.
Good point, Devin. Excuse me. I think also it's also important to remember that a lot of the restaurants were closed as well. So, you know, people obviously need to feed themselves and, you know, had to sit at home and cook. And so the grocery retailers were able to enjoy the benefit of that as well. So even though they had some restrictions in terms of what they could sell, they did have this windfall, you know, on the grocery side. It's still early days to say whether or not this sort of thing is sustainable. But, you know, I think we're heading into a slightly higher inflation environment right now. So potentially the impact of that will benefit all retailers, but in particular grocery retailers. And I think the share prices are starting to price some of that in, you know, in sort of 2021, 2022.
So listen, what's the story with banks today? I mean, I see they've been performing badly. Results were streaming in. We saw ABSA yesterday. What are the investors seeing here? Because some pretty hard knocks for banks this afternoon, wasn't there?
Absolutely. You know, it surprised me because yesterday ABSA's results came out. Listen, headline earnings had halved, and it was largely anticipated. You had a massive increase in impairments. Even if you look at Standard Bank a couple of weeks back as well, you know, impairments went from sort of 7 billion to 20 billion. You know, you can imagine that is going to have an impact on your earnings. But of course, if it's just once off, then the market would tend to shrug it off. But I think what's concerning markets right now are these low interest rates. Yes, benefiting retailers, but low interest rates are not necessarily good for banks. If you look at ABSA's results, you know, their interest margin went from 4.5% to close to 4%. That's a big drop in interest margin for any bank. And I suppose if interest rates stay low like this for a while, we could potentially end up, you know, in the same situation a lot of the Western banks find themselves in, with very low interest rates and not much margin coming through.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. Nesan Nair from Sasfin, thanks very much indeed